We're not really close enough yet at this second potential summit meeting.
The most important step would be North Korea's declaration of its nuclear weapons, its fissile material, its facilities.
Everything the North Koreans have done up till now is largely symbolic. It's not affected their ability to produce more nuclear weapons.
Prevent ship-to-ship transfers, important to complement the maximum pressure campaign.
Progress on inter-Korean relations, but no progress on denuclearization.
Approaching the limit of Washington's patience with how far the North-South process can go.
Not coordinating with U.S. officials, we could see real friction in the alliance.
From the Voice of America, this is Washington Talk.
Hello and welcome to Washington Talk. I'm Eun-Jang Cho. 3 months after the historic summit between President Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, works are underway to arrange a second summit meeting. Chairman Kim requested this meeting, and it remains to be seen what he will bring to the table. What should the U.S. be asking for before entering into a second summit?
The primary purpose of the letter was to request another meeting with the president, which we are open to and are already in the process.
My guest today, Mr. Frank Januzzi, president of the Maxwell Foundation and former advisor to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Also joining us today, Mr. David Maxwell, senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Mr. Maxwell is a retired U.S. Army Special Forces colonel with command assignments in Korea, among other countries. Welcome to the program.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you.
North Korea wanted to hold a second summit meeting, but before going into the second meeting, what should be the preconditions?
I don't know there need to be any preconditions per se. The North Koreans hate preconditions, but I think you don't ordinarily hold a summit meeting at all without some expectation of real progress coming out of that meeting. And in this case, I think the North Koreans are looking for a real movement on a declaration to end the Korean War in a more formal way. And I think the Americans are looking for actual, concrete, and perhaps irreversible, if I can use that word, steps toward denuclearization. Everything the North Koreans have done up till now is largely symbolic and has not affected their ability to produce more nuclear weapons.
David, what assurances do we need?
I think groundwork has to be done before a second summit, and so that there can be some substantive agreements that are announced during the summit. So I think that, that's not a precondition, but I think that's an important step prior to some kind of summit. I also agree with Frank is that North Korea has taken no substantive steps towards dismantlement of their nuclear program. And while President Trump suspended the readiness exercise, which is a substantial concession, although as North Korea will note and President Moon will note, it's not irreversible. It is a degradation of readiness, and it is a concession to one of the most demanded items by North Korea for many years. Mm-hmm. There has to be an agreement to move forward, and North Korea really needs to demonstrate that it is sincere about dismantling its nuclear program.
Mm-hmm. So what substance do we need from this? Definition of denuclearization, some kind of timetable. What do we need from this coming out of the summit?
Well, for me, I think the most important step would be North Korea's declaration of its nuclear weapons, its fissile material, its facilities. I think that, to start the process of negotiation for dismantlement, there has to be a common understanding of what North Korea possesses, and that has to be provided, and then, of course, inspected. So I think that is really the start point for dismantlement.
I think David's right that that's the start point, but I think we're not really close enough yet at this second potential summit meeting to get that kind of declaration. I think we first need to agree on what denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula really means. And we're not even there yet. We don't have a real definition.
That's right. Which is why I use the word dismantlement of North Korea's nuclear program. I think it is problematic that we have adopted Kim Jong-un's narrative of denuclearization of the entire peninsula. As everyone knows, there have been no nuclear weapons in South Korea since 1991, and so South is effectively not nuclear. But of course, from North Korea's perspective, the presence of the U.S. forces brings access to nuclear weapons, and that is really what he's talking about. So I think we've got to get that definition of terms, a common understanding, and that's why I recommend that we talk about dismantlement of North Korea's nuclear program.
If we're still talking about the definition of denuclearization and the declaration list, are we back at square one before the first summit meeting, or have been any developments since the first summit before the second summit meeting?
Most of the developments have been in North-South relations, and those are very encouraging. And there has been a warming and a regularization, if you will, of communication channels and some reduction of tension. And on the U.S.-North Korea side, there's also been a marked improvement in the mood. The two leaders are tweeting love notes to each other, expressing admiration and respect for each other. And that's certainly a big change from where we were just 9 months ago. But I think that where we have not yet arrived is at a point where we have a clear understanding of the endpoint, and there's no roadmap yet for the step-by-step process of how we get there. And I think it begins with a better understanding of what denuclearization or dismantlement, as David says, means, and a step-by-step process of reciprocal actions necessary to advance toward that goal.
Chairman Kim, since Singapore keeps on saying that he is willing to denuclearize, so is he repeating empty promises?
Well, I think I hope he's not. I hope he's sincere, but he needs to be tested, and we need to give him the opportunity to demonstrate his sincerity, and which I think is, in terms of the process, I hate to use the word patience, but these things don't happen overnight. It is a long, hard slog, to borrow from another era. But I think now with the appointment of Stephen Biegun, we are committed with a full-time envoy to really work the details. I think that since the two summits in Panmunjom and Singapore, there have been talk, better relations north and south, improved dialogue at the top level, and it's really an expression of President Trump's unconventional experimental top-down diplomacy. So that is setting the conditions. But now the hard work has to be done, and we have Stephen Biegun to lead that effort full-time, because Secretary Pompeo has to be Secretary of State for the whole world.
And the good news is that, that's precisely the area where Steve Biegun has his expertise. He is a process-focused national security expert. He's the guy who can coordinate the interagency discussions in the United States, Department of Energy, Department of State, Department of Defense, to get the clear list of what we need to see happen, and then to sit down with the South Koreans and the North Koreans to see what they can do in response. So I think Biegun has his work cut out for him, and I think patience is not a dirty word. We should be patient and give Steve Biegun a chance to do his job.
David, if North Korea wants end-of-war declaration, then what should North Korea do first to reduce tensions on the peninsula?
Well, that's a great point. Of course, the only threat is not nuclear. The conventional threat is still very significant. And a simple declaration of peace, while it may be symbolic, really does nothing to enhance the security of South Korea. And we should keep in mind that North Korea, with a 1.2 million man army, 70% of which is forward deployed in offensive posture between the DMZ and Pyongyang. The most important element of that is its artillery. And while South Korea is discussing confidence-building measures from their side, reducing guard posts, south barrier fence, removing anti-tank obstacles, there really needs to be reciprocal measures on the north side. I think a declaration of the end of the war needs to be accompanied with a reduction in offensive capabilities so that there is no miscalculation and a restart of hostilities, because a statement or a piece of paper provides no defense.
I think you're hearing the wisdom of a man who served on the DMZ there from
Right,
David.
right.
You know, words are nice, but actual capabilities, that's what we want to focus on.
Yes.
And on this topic of military, on the Foundation Day military parade, we didn't see any ICBMs. But just because we didn't see it on the parade, does that mean North Korea has stopped developing those ICBMs?
Well, to the contrary, as far as we know, they continue to build them and probably continue to improve them and continue to produce fissile material for the warheads to go on them. So out of sight should not mean out of mind. And this was a smart move by North Korea to lower the tension, to lower the visibility of their nuclear program in hopes that they would convey the message that President Trump, in fact, I think received. President Trump tweeted about the fact that he was so impressed that the parade did not highlight the North's military capability. And I think this was a very calculated move by the North, but it should not deceive us into thinking that their ICBM capability has in any way been reduced.
You know, Chairman Kim, on his January 1st address, said that they'd completed development, ready for mass production. And Kim Jong-nam, in the speech on 9 September, said that they've achieved their highest military capability and can now focus on economics. So to me, the message is that they have completed development, don't need to demonstrate that because they have now brought us to the table.
Last question before we go. U.S. Trump administration has been hinting that it will step up measures against illicit ship-to-ship transfer by North Korean vessels. And U.S. officials are getting ready to name and shame the violators. So would this give a new lever to the Trump administration?
Well, you know, John Bolton was the original architect, or one of the architects, of the Proliferation Security Initiative, PSI, in the first Bush administration, G.W. Bush. And so I see Bolton's hand in this. But I think it is designed to complement, not to undermine U.S. diplomacy. The pressure and the sanctions campaign has already, frankly, been reduced. But for it to be credible, there has to be enforcement. There has to be calling out of the violators. So this is a move, I think, by Bolton to try to maintain some credibility in the sanctions regime.
Mm-hmm.
PSI is it could be an effective tool. 105 countries have actually signed up to it. But I could see the South Korean Navy, perhaps the Japanese Navy, the U.S. Navy, operating in international waters, maybe not have to conduct maritime intercept operations, but the presence of those may prevent ship-to-ship transfers and allowing sanctions violations to continue and resources to flow into the North. I think that's important to complement the maximum pressure campaign.
Mm-hmm. We'll end our discussion here and watch video for our next topic. South Korea opened a liaison office with North Korea at the Kaesong Industrial Complex. In response, the State Department says the U.S. reaffirmed the Panmunjom Declaration during the Singapore summit because progress on inter-Korean relations must happen in lockstep with progress on denuclearization. Now we have this progress on inter-Korean relations and obviously no progress on denuclearization, so no lockstep there. How would you look at the USR Alliance, where it stands right now?
Well, for me, I think military to military, the relationship is as strong as ever. I think the South Korean military and the U.S. military, we are blood allies, and so I think that is strong. But I do think that if we are not in step politically and diplomatically, that brings friction to the alliance. Now, I don't think that dismantlement and the process can occur at the same pace as improved North-South relations.
I worry that South Korea is getting too far out front right now. But I can't blame President Moon for trying to advance the North-South process. That's his focus. The danger is that at some point, President Trump and his administration are going to reach the conclusion that South Korea's outreach is somehow undermining U.S. denuclearization efforts. We're not there yet, and Began is in the region now, coordinating, consulting. But South Korea is having to make a very tough judgment call. How far and how fast to push North-South to try to help the denuclearization process. How far can they go before essentially they get out of phase with Washington? And I think we are approaching the limit of Washington's patience with how far the North-South process can go before the North takes meaningful steps on denuclearization.
And let me echo Frank's comment there and make this comment. President Moon wants peace first. I think that's clear. But what concerns me is peace at any cost, or peace at what cost? And that is where things could be troublesome, because if it is at the cost of the alliance, it may not lead to the real peace that we need on the Korean Peninsula. So peace at any cost can be problematic.
President Moon, when meeting with a group of special advisors, said that the current stalemate in the denuclearization talks came because the United States is not taking any reciprocal steps, whereas North Korea took irreversible steps. And he called the stopping of the alliance military training as a reversible step. So is President Moon on the same page with the United States right now? And can he play a constructive, good role as a go-between during the upcoming inter-Korean summit?
I think that both Pyongyang and Seoul are increasingly frustrated by what they see as Washington dragging its feet on the political step of sort of normalizing the diplomatic situation between the United States and North Korea. But that statement, to me, by President Moon, while it may curry a bit of favor with Pyongyang, it's not going to please anybody in Washington who would much prefer that he stick to the talking points about denuclearization as a critical component of this whole process.
David, the implementation cost for the 2007 Inter-Korean Summit was $13 billion US. So with the Inter-Korean economic projects this time around, will it also become a cash cow for North Korea, do you think?
Well, I think that's very possible, and certainly that's what Kim Jong-un wants to have happen. I mean, part of their strategy is to be able to get something for nothing. And so, and they've done that masterfully through the peace and prosperity policy of Roh Moo-hyun, through the Sunshine Policy, and at various times throughout the last 2 decades. And so the international community has provided a lot of aid, money, and economic development, I think, would certainly go to benefit the regime. And it's also troublesome that in that budget that is being proposed for economic development, there's also a reduction in the budget for taking care of North Korean refugees in the South. And I find that troublesome from a South Korean perspective and from the perspective of the Korean people. So this will be a cash cow for the North, and it's something that I think that should be scrutinized very, very intently.
Right. On that note, we'll move on to our next segment. Now time for the photo moment, time to look at an interesting North Korea picture. Today we have a photo from the glorious country mass games held on the 70th anniversary of North Korea's founding day. This is a huge propaganda festival involving 17,490 student performers. Young students hold up cards to perform synchronized patterns for hours and go through months of training. Now, Frank, what's your reaction?
Well, the North Korean people are famous for these mass displays, and it's incredible effort that they mount to do this. It strikes me that it's a source of enormous pride for the residents of the capital. I've been in Pyongyang and watched some of the drills for these mass displays, and there's kind of a festive attitude among those who are participating.
I think it takes incredible discipline, hard work and practice. My feeling is I agree with Frank, but I also think that what productive work could be done by these people, whether students in school, their education, what are they missing? And while this looks good, it glorifies the regime, how does it really contribute to improving the lives of the Korean people living in the North, which should be something that we should all be concerned about.
I'm most concerned about the human rights of these children who cannot even go to restrooms during the performance.
Yes.
Well, on that note, Frank, David, thank you for joining us.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Jung.
Thank you. And this was Washington Talk from the Voice of America, and I'm Eun Jung Cho. Join us next week for more analysis on North Korea.